Okay, good girl. Can you lay down? Okay, good girl. All right, hey, it's Eric here. I am in self-isolation. I don't know what day number this is. It is Tuesday. Yes, honey, I know. It's Tuesday, I think. Yeah, Tuesday, April 14th, something like that. That looks like that's right. Anyway, I could be wrong on the date even. Anyway, I am here in my backyard in beautiful Arvada, Colorado, in self-isolation, and I wanted to just do a quick little book review. This is going to be my first book review I've ever done, and I don't know how good of a job I'm going to do at it. I do fancy myself to be a writer, although I haven't written any books yet, so I'm not quite the author. But the book we're going to be talking about today is the Red String Book, and this is by Yehuda Berg. I think he's a rabbi, if I am not mistaken, and he talks about the Kabbalah. So the way this all got kicked off, and let alone my first book review, is a book on spirituality, believe it or not. So let's get started with it. And first things first, I was in New York City for New Year's Eve, and I was staying at the Lexington in Manhattan, and I kept looking out my window, and I saw this place called the Kabbalah Center. It's on 47th, I think, and 7th in Manhattan. And out of just total curiosity, I went in one day. I was married, in what they refer to intermarried, about a little over 20 years ago, more like 25 years ago, and my first wife was Jewish, so my kids are Jewish, so I'm actually pretty up on Judaism. I'm not, myself, I don't practice Judaism, and really haven't had much of a reason to pay much of attention to it. But I've heard about Kabbalah, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and I've done a lot of work in spiritual development, and the Kabbalah keeps coming up. Every time we get to some higher end level of study, whether it's in Hinduism, it's under Buddhism, the Kabbalah keeps coming up. And the reason it comes up is because there's a certain wisdom to it. And like most of these spiritual teachings, spiritual schools of thought, whatnot, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, at the upper echelon of what they call Gnostic understanding, often are these secret, what they keep as secret teachings. They're secret often because they just never come up in the prayer ritual or in the daily in and out of being a practitioner of a religion. In Buddhism, in certain parts of Buddhism, it's not seen as appropriate for somebody to directly approach Buddhism straight on, that they need to do it through a monk. In other religions, in Judaism, for a long, long time, the idea of teaching the Kabbalah, that only happened after you'd been studying, practicing Judaism for a long time. And so for a long time, the Kabbalah was not open to anybody who wasn't really way up inside of Judaism. And I wasn't aware of this, but I thought I'd go in and check it out. And I came away with this book, the Red String Book, that completely opened my eyes to what Kabbalah is about. The fact that it is a technology or an understanding of spiritual technology that we have in us that underpins all religion and is independent of Judaism or any other mystic school of thought. And so let's talk a little bit about why this book is so awesome. And I think it belongs up there with the Tao of Pooh. I really think that it's that good of a book. Rabbi Yehuda Berg has a poetic use of language. I actually was researching him online. Turns out that they've got a bunch of quotes by him. He's a notable speaker. Sorry, I just hit my mic. Notable speaker, and he's quoted quite often. The Red String book talks about the fact that we are this spiritual. We have built into us this spiritual technology, and understanding how that spiritual technology works, it makes it so that if we understand it, we have a chance of living a much more productive or much more rewarding existence, because we won't be fighting against things we don't understand. So much of this world we don't really know, or know ahead of time. So, we have to kind of figure it out as we go along. And the Kabbalah talks about that, and it talks about how we're like this radio antenna. We are like we're able to put out negative energy, or what Berg refers to as evil. We're also able to receive it if we're open to it. And what's really neat about this book is that he goes through and just talks about much here. Let me go to my notes, because I had this all sorted out. So the Kabbalah talks about why we're here in the first place, the purpose of existence, really. Existing without purpose. I understand people do it, but it makes life much, much harder. It's much more rewarding if you know that you're going through all this struggle, and there's a reason. And this book goes over what that reason is, and basically it posits, or it puts out there that we chose to be here. We chose to be here and not have any memory of the wisdom that we have into the things that we've learned up until that point, because we want to discover the wonder of creation, and the fact that if we had everything we wanted all the time without ever having to wait for it, life would get really boring. And so it's a choice for us as spiritual beings to want to be here and to want to struggle. But what Rabbi Berg talks about, it says there's this thing that keeps us from seeing the light of creation. It's the curtain, this curtain that separates us from the wonder that is everything that God has created for us, and the fact that we're part of that creation that God has put there for us. And again, this is independent of any religion, regardless of what the dogma is or how you approach God. All of these ideas, all of these schools of thought assume that God exists. They're working on that. That's why it's called faith. So basically, the understanding is that our ego is what is the curtain. It's what separates us from the light of creation. And Rabbi Berg talks about the curtain. It says, Kabbalah says the Creator hung up a big curtain. This curtain conceals the light in the same way a thick curtain blocks out the sun in the room. In both cases, the light never really disappears. The curtain merely conceals what's there. So he moves forward and he says, how can we possibly remove a curtain that we can't see, or that we don't perceive, in order to free ourselves from the darkness, the very darkness preventing us from locating the cause of this curtain in the first place? He says we have to figure out what the curtain is, and that's where the wisdom in this book plays out in really poetic form. He goes through and says the curtain's actually the human ego, and it's our identity, and it's our need to be separate and be special and be unique that actually keeps us from truly appreciating the wonder of creation. It's that need to have an ego to accomplish things, to be somebody, that interferes with our ability to really perceive true joy. It's crazy that you go all this length and then you find out, wait, what I really need to do is uncouple or unplug from the identity this idea of who I thought I was all this time. If I really want to truly enjoy myself and enjoy the people around me, I've got to let that go. And this book is just fantastic for that, because these are like things I already kind of knew from the other study I had done, but said in another way, in a very simple way, in a very poetic way. And I just feel really, really blessed to have found this. He moves on and he talks about evil and the evil eye and the destructive power of suspicion and judgment, and how important it is that we do our best to reserve the judgment of others, because what that does is it opens us up to being judged by others. It's just this great wisdom of how to behave yourself, really. Stuff we should have learned in kindergarten, I guess, is one of the terms. Basically, the rest of the book goes through some meditative practices that you can use in conjunction with the string, the technology of how the string itself works. But I think the really cool thing in here is the idea, and this is something I learned from Kundalini, is the identity, our need for identity, keeps us from the true magic of the world around us. And as soon as we can learn that we're going to be safe without the ego, without that identity, we can move forward into some really amazing things. It's there in Buddhism, it's there in Taoism, it's there in Hinduism, it's there in Judaism. I'm sure I can find it in other religions as well. It's independent of religion, these spiritual ideas. This is not a promotion of any specific religion. I don't claim to understand anything about Judaism, or really any of those other isms that I mentioned. Just these are all things that we can assimilate into our consciousness. And I just feel really, really grateful to have found this book. The same amount of gratitude that I felt for Benjamin Hoff with the Tao. So thank you, Yehuda Berg. I really appreciate this book, and if you're looking for a good book to read, check this out for sure. All right, we'll see you soon.